Okay, today is kind of part two of the Roman Republic. We've done some of this. We've talked about a little bit of the way the Republic runs in class. But we did talk about the social conflict between the plebeians and the patricians, and that's kind of what we're going to get into today. Talk about how some reformers came along and tried to change things, how Rome tried dictatorship at spots and times, and eventually how it all blows up when Julius Caesar decides to seize power. So you need to watch the video, take notes, stop and answer any questions that I ask you to answer. And at the end, you need to be prepared to tell me why Caesar was killed and who do you think killed him. Okay, so we're going to start with Tiberius Gracchus and land reform. Okay, the lower classes, the plebeians, are suffering under the weight of taxation, not a lot of land like we talked about in yesterday's video. Tiberius Gracchus is elected to the position of tribune of the plebeians, which means he's kind of the leader of the plebeians, and he promises land reform. He tells the people, you fight and die to give luxury to other men, but you have not a foot of ground to call your own. Okay, he wants to limit the amount of land each person can own, wants to rebuild the farming class by giving back land to people. The patricians are not real happy of him, and Tiberius Gracchus and hundreds of his followers end up being murdered. Okay. Tiberius has a brother. His name is Gaius, and he comes to power after 10 years after his brother is murdered, also pushing land reform, wants to give away even more. He wanted the government to sell grain to the poor at reduced prices, and he proposed that landless Romans be settled in the provinces. Rome had conquered all this territory, so why not give the people who are living in Rome and elsewhere and causing problems, give them a piece of the pie by sending them out to the provinces. First of all, you're sending Roman citizens up. It's going to help Romanize these areas, but it's also going to get them out of the city of Rome and elsewhere where they're causing problems. He also wants to put together public works programs to employ the poor, and he wants to reform the way that taxes are collected by the publicans, wants to take away power from the Senate. Needless to say, this is not popular with the Senate, and riots erupt. In 121 BCE, so roughly a year after he comes to power, he's killed along with thousands of his supporters. He's actually beaten to death with a chair. Okay. Rome kind of breaks into two separate parties. You have the Optimates, which are the party of the Senate. They want to make sure that the wealthy and the senators and the patricians stay where they are. Then you have the Populares, which are the people, and they have its strength in the assembly, and they want reform. So you've got these two groups hanging against each other. You got the wealthy who are trying to keep power, and you got the people, the patricians, the plebeians that want to get a piece of the pie for themselves, and they want reform. Okay. Eventually, it leads to military dictatorship, and Rome does it slightly different than maybe you'd think it was. Okay. Basically, a dictatorship was where they hired somebody, usually a general, to take over and try to straighten everything out. Okay, so why does this happen? Well, you got the constant fighting between rich and poor. You've got restlessness out in the provinces because the same issues are going on. You have the slave rebellions like Spartacus, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. You're beginning to have barbarian invasions from the north, not as serious as what will happen 500 or 600 years down the road, but you're having these problems. And the people need strong leadership, and this is why they turn to a dictator. They give someone absolute power for a short period of time. Okay, the first of these dictators is a guy named Gaius Marius. He is the leader of the Populares, and he's elected consul in 107 BCE. He had been a successful general both in North Africa and in Italy, and he's elected consul 7 times in a row. He does his big program is army reform, being a senator, forms a volunteer-paid professional army staffed by Rome's landless. There's no more property qualification to be part of the army. And he gives the soldiers the spoils of war and the pensions that they've earned for their service. So when they go and conquer someplace, the soldiers get a piece of the loot from the conquest. Okay. The next one is Lucius Sulla. He is a patrician. He had, again, military success. Like I said, most of these guys were generals. He puts down a revolt of Roman allies who wanted full citizenship rights. These people eventually get it, but not before Sulla cements his reputation. And he puts down a revolt in Asia Minor. The assembly had chosen Gaius Marius for the same job, but their two armies fight in Rome, and Sulla wins, and he goes off to take care of it. Marius and his supporters come to power in Rome while Sulla is away. They kill a lot of the leaders of the Senate. Sulla comes back in 82 BCE, and he kills a bunch of Marius's guys and confiscates their property, and he rules as dictator for 3 years, gives the Senate back control of the government when he's done, and then he goes home. Okay, this is a picture of a Roman triumph, which whenever a great conquering hero won battles and he came back to Rome, he was lauded with a parade, kind of like the ticker tape parade that they have in New York City for heroes, or the championship parades they have when a team wins a championship. Same kind of thing. The key to this is that they were not allowed to bring their army under arms and under their command. They had to surrender command of their army before they could be given their triumph. That way you couldn't have somebody seizing power. And this will become an issue a little bit down the road when we get to Julius Caesar. Okay. Rome continues to have problems even after the dictators. And then they turn to what comes to be known as the First Triumvirate. And it's kind of an unofficial and at first secret pact to control Rome between three guys. And it controls Rome for 7 years. The member of it are Pompey, who is the great general of his time, Marcus Crassus, who's probably the wealthiest man in Rome, and then Julius Caesar, who has made his reputation as a leader of the plebeians, as a tribune. Okay, so this is a little bit on them. Pompey he had his army behind him. He became the leader in Italy. Crassus has got money. He becomes the leader of the eastern provinces, the areas of what are modern-day Turkey and the Middle East, of Israel and Syria and Egypt, where more money could be made. And Caesar, he is wildly popular. He's considered to be the man of the people, and he is given the job of proconsul of Gaul. So he's basically put in charge of the Roman region of Gaul, which is modern-day France, but it bleeds over into Germany, at least as far as the Rhine River. So each has their own little bailiwick, shall we say, where they are in complete control. Okay, but the problem is Crassus is killed in battle, fighting the Parthians, who are the successors to the Persians, and this ends the First Triumvirate. Now, Pompey, being a general, thinks that he should be seen as the first man of the Republic, or soon-to-be empire, but he's very jealous of all the success that Caesar is having in Gaul, and Caesar has a great public relations machine. So he makes sure everybody in Rome knows just what a great job he's doing and how rich he's getting and what a great general he is. And Pompey gets jealous. So he talks the Senate into demanding that Caesar to return to Rome as a private citizen without his army. That way he doesn't have any real power, because his power is with the army that's in Gaul. Okay, Caesar catches wind of this, and he has a decision to make. Does he follow the Senate's orders and return powerless before Pompey, or does he disobey the Senate and violate Roman law by returning with his army? So he marches south with his troops, crosses the Rubicon that we've already talked about. Tradition and law said that soldiers had to disband before crossing this river. Caesar supposedly said the die is cast. They have crossed the Rubicon, which means he's gone past the point of no return. He leads his troops across the Rubicon into Rome, and once he crosses this river, he can't turn back. He's on the road to rebellion and civil war. Okay, so Pompey realizes that he doesn't have the soldiers in Italy proper to fight Caesar, so he flees to Greece, where his armies are. Okay, he did have a bigger army, but he makes several blunders. Caesar said of Pompey that today the enemy would have won if they had had a commander who was a winner. And he says that man does not know how to win a war. Caesar chases after him into Greece, defeats Pompey at a place called Pharsalus in 488 BCE. Pompey then flees the battlefield to Egypt, hoping to get protection from Ptolemy the 13th. But Ptolemy knows that rather than that Caesar's army is coming after him, and rather than have the war and get dragged into the war, he kills Pompey rather than giving him shelter. And when Caesar shows up In Egypt, Ptolemy presents Caesar's severed head to him, or Pompey's severed head to Caesar, supposedly on a silver platter. This is where Caesar meets Cleopatra. She is the co-ruler. She's married to her younger brother, the king. This is the Egyptian tradition. But she has been pushed out of power by her brother Ptolemy. Caesar restores her to her throne, and they also have a relationship. And he has a son by Cleopatra named Caesarion, who's born roughly a year later. Okay, now, Caesar wins his victories in the east. He mocks Pompey's previous entries, and he sends word to Rome. He says, Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. The military victories over Pompey leave Caesar as the man in charge. He defeats the remnants of the senatorial party fighting in North Africa. With Mark Antony, he defeats Pompey's sons in Spain, and he returns to Rome in triumph in 45 BCE, along with his close friend and lead general Mark Antony. Okay. Immediately sets to work putting into reforms. He adopts a program of public works, distributes public land to the Romans, gives citizenship to the people of the provinces, most importantly those allies he's made in Gaul, and he reforms the provincial governments. He reforms the calendar, the Julian calendar, the calendar we use today, including leap year, is Julius Caesar's reform. And he reorganizes the Roman Caesar system of coinage, minting coins with his face on them naturally. Okay, but he takes it a little too far. The Senate doesn't like a lot of his reforms because they're helping the poor at the expense of the wealthy, and they don't like his power, his popularity, and power. So they decide they need to do something about him. On March 15th, 44 BCE, what are known as the Ides of March, and that's simply a term for the middle of the month, the senators conspired to assassinate Caesar. Mark Antony had tried to stop Caesar from going to the Senate on that day, but a group of senators intercept Caesar and they get him to enter the building using a side entrance. Caesar is stabbed to death with at least 23 times, some say 35, on the floor of the Senate House, and was left to die. Among the conspirators are Marcus Junius Brutus, a descendant of the traditional founder of the Roman Republic, and also a close friend of Caesar's. You may have heard the line, et tu, Brute, and that's Latin for, and you also, Brutus. Caesar can't believe his close friend has participated in this. So this is a picture of the death of Caesar. And it was said that there was a whole group of senators, and each of them took a turn stabbing him. Okay, so what I want you to be able to answer when you get into class tomorrow is, why was Caesar murdered? And then we're going to talk about who killed him. That's all for now. Make sure you've got good notes. I will be checking them in class.